financial goal.
Yeah.
Tell me why you decided to go flight.
Well, I'd just never seen downtown with all this snow, so I thought I'd ski down.
Think about that when people are saying, oh, these bus drivers don't care, and I was thinking of that very strongly this morning as I was mushing through knee-deep snow getting here. But most of them, you'll find, do their best to get down here. You hear a lot of stories about it taking an hour and a half for people to get to work. But they, for the most part, give it a pretty good try.
Mail delivery has been suspended today in the Twin Cities area as a result of the storm and because of our concern for the safety of our employees.
Well, we got up at 4:30 and the flight was still going, and then we got out here and it was supposed to leave at 7:20 and nothing. Everything's shut down. Well, maybe I've got a flight to leave at 5:20, so maybe I'll get out by then.
You gonna stay here all day?
Yeah, catch up on my soap operas.
Good evening, everyone. Those Twin Cityans pretty much tell the story of the blizzard that hit us last night. It came, it caused problems, but we coped thanks to experience and, I think, a sense of humor. Pat?
Well, if you stayed up into the wee hours this morning, you got a bird's-eye view of how this whole thing developed. At first, it hit a kind of charming note, the first real snowfall we've had all season. But as the hours marched past, most of that charm probably slipped away as you watched more and more of your sidewalk, your car, and everything else disappear under the huge piles of snow. All told, it now reads like this. The blizzard dumped about 16 inches of snow in 13 hours. That's about 1/3 of the amount we would normally get all winter long. Minneapolis officials will try returning to the city to normal by starting the snow emergency sometime tonight. It begins about 9 p.m. with the plowing of all emergency routes at that time. Parking on those streets is banned until the full width of the streets are finally all plowed. North-south streets will be cleared tomorrow from 8 a.m. until 8 at night, and east-west routes will be done on Thursday during the same hours. In the meantime, St. Paul's snow emergency is already underway, and for a report on that, here's Caroline Lowe.
This is the first snow emergency of the season, and public works crews say it's the worst they have seen in more than 20 years.
The storm that we had last January, we had more snow with that storm, but we didn't have the wind that we've had this time. And with the 17 inches of snow and with the high winds overnight, we've got some of our streets with drifts of 5 to 6 feet deep that are just totally impassable.
Since 8 o'clock this morning, 75 trucks have been on the road plowing and sanding. By the time they wrap things up at midnight, they will have cleared 300 miles of emergency routes and main arteries, roughly 1/3 of the city. It all begins again tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock when North and South Streets will be cleared, followed on Thursday with crews working on East and West Streets. At this point, NYGARD expects to declare a second snow emergency on Thursday, with crews back on the job for another 3 days. Snowbirds won't be tagged during the first emergency, but city officials request that you do move your car, or you'll definitely get a ticket during the second round. And if you can't move your car, it's a good idea to at least clear off the snow so crews won't run into it while they're plowing. City officials also ask citizens to clear sidewalks in front of their homes and near intersections. And for a look at how the blizzard affected long-haul truckers, here's Dave Nimmer.
On an ordinary Monday night at the Branch Cafe, business is usually pretty slow. But last night and this morning, the storm got things jumping.
We pushed a lot of cars, we pulled a few cars, and got a lot of people in there were stranded and had to have a place to stay for the night.
I imagine you had a few sleeping around here then.
About 15, I think.
Where'd you put them up?
All in the booths, and there was 4 in the office, I think, and a lot of them were running around shoveling people out, too.
Kid has been on his feet for 16 hours, but at least he's making money, which is more than Fred Gross can say. The Montana trucker lost control of his 18-wheeler about 6 this morning on a curve just east of North Branch.
So it's kind of a costly experience, this storm for you.
5 or 10,000, Benjamin.
Ever happened to you before?
No. A million miles. Never had it.
Where are you going to be staying tonight, Fred?
Crossroads Motel. A new home. Home away from home, Minnesota.
By 1 o'clock this afternoon, vehicles and people started to move in and out of here. But none of it happened the easy way. The trucker from Montana said he could find one blessing in disguise to this winter storm, and that is it kind of restored his faith in human nature. He said he ran into some mighty friendly people willing to help him out. With photographer Bill Kemplin, Dave Nimmer, WCCO Television News in North Branch, Minnesota.
In Nimmer's defense, any kind of sartorial decor is sartorial splendor in an emergency. Normally, in a snowstorm, one can rely on MTC buses to take one where one needs to go, and not so today. Only 25 routes were operating, and as Colleen Needles reports, all of them were delayed.
This morning, during what is normally a rush hour, only 10% of the MTC's 820 buses were running, with the majority running only in the central parts of the cities. There was little, if any, bus service in the suburbs and none on the freeways. One of the biggest problems for the MTC, particularly this morning, was getting enough drivers. Many couldn't make it to work, so others who worked last night had to work overtime. Those who finally did make it to work did so on their own power.
I walked 22 blocks from my house, I found out today.
Another problem that has limited bus service is the number of cars stranded in the snow. This has hampered travel, particularly on the side streets. And of course, the cars weren't the only ones getting stuck. About 30 buses succumbed to the heavy, wet snow. Most people stayed home from work today, but those who did venture forth seemed to take all the delays and alternate routes in stride.
Well, we weren't aware that they weren't coming. You know, that was the problem. They weren't running on time, and there weren't any on that street. So, after we all found out we got there. He got stuck a couple of times. I had to back off and get a running start and around the corner, you know. It was fun. A fun ride.
Again, transportation officials are discouraging anyone from traveling tonight unless absolutely necessary. There is limited bus service, but only on major streets within the Twin Cities. However, an MTC spokesman says they hope to have bus service back to normal by tomorrow morning. That, of course, depends on how quickly the streets get cleared and whether or not there is much drifting snow. With photographer Rick Olson, Colleen Needles, WCCO Television News, Minneapolis.
Twin Cities International Airport remains closed this evening. It's been shut down all day, the first time that's happened in 13 years. Tom Hendrick has a direct report on the situation there. Tom?
Dave, planes are beginning to take off from Twin Cities International, but only a few. The first to depart was a Northwest Flight 747 bound, appropriately enough, for Honolulu, Hawaii. But it is slow going. The airport runways, because of the drifting snow, must be plowed fairly regularly, and that goes double for the taxiways, which have been a major part of the problem today. Meantime, hundreds of people continue to wait here at the airport for either flights that are coming in or going out, and some of them are getting a little bit upset and frustrated. The first incoming plane is due to land here within just a couple of minutes, and there may be some question of whether the airport is ready for that. Airport officials had said an hour ago that it wouldn't be ready for landings until about 8 o'clock. In fact, that is what they told the FAA in Washington. But some officials say that there's some pressure on them to get these planes in and out of here. And another person told me that at least a dozen flights have taken off from other airports around the country destined for Twin Cities International, only to be diverted before they got here. Again, we do have a plane that is scheduled to get in here in a couple of minutes. And with me is Larry McCabe, the assistant director of the airport. And let me put the question to you. Is the airport ready?
The airport will be ready when we allow this airplane to land. In other words, when we've sanded the runway, then we'll be ready to open the runway for this particular airplane to land.
So is that plane circling now?
No, it's not here yet, but it'll be here shortly.
It's supposed to get here in a couple of minutes.
Right.
Tell me about the pressure that you were talking to me about earlier, pressure on the system to get planes in and out.
Well, I think that this is oftentimes true when airplanes take off, for example, from one coast to the other, and they've got a 2 or 3 hour flight, and there is an estimate given on when the runway will be ready for use and the taxiways in the airport. And so people launch airplanes and they get them airborne, and of course they have to be landed somewhere. And they don't like to divert them to other airports, and they like to get them into the airport that they were designated to land at.
What was that? What did you mean when you said to me, this is the kind of pressure, this is what happened in Boston? Were you referring to that time a plane landed in a snowstorm and skidded off the runway into Boston Harbor?
I'm not too familiar with all of the details in Boston. I'd rather not comment on it at this time.
But there is a lot of pressure, and...
Well, I suspect there is, sure.
But you were going to make sure that this runway, the runways are safe here before planes either land or take off, regardless of any kind of pressure.
That's correct.
Thank you very much for being with us on the 6 o'clock report. Back to you in the studio.
This storm. There were also assorted snowblower injuries and some broken bones. A patient from St. John's Hospital was transferred to St. Paul Ramsey Medical Center for emergency surgery when the surgeon on call at St. John's was unable to make it to the hospital. Doctors are warning people who have heart problems not to try and shovel the snow. Well, while most medical facilities were open today, Postal Service was crippled in the Twin Cities, and as Philip Holman reports, this is the third time that's happened in the last 10 years.
At the peak of the blizzard, the city's post office resembled a monastery. Postal officials froze all deliveries to homes and businesses.
Mail delivery has been suspended today in the Twin Cities area as a result of the storm and because of our concern for the safety of our employees. We expect all mail services to resume Wednesday.
But workers who could get to work safely were encouraged to come, and a handful did.
Well, seeing as I only live a mile and a half from work, it's fairly easy for me to get to work, even through like the 2-foot snow that we had last year.
Mailers with important letters weren't deterred by the hazardous weather either.
I wanted to get a letter out to my daughter in South Dakota.
Why?
Well, it's very important to her. Something she has to have by the weekend.
Postal officials said all Christmas mail went out on time, so they don't expect any major disruption in future service. In fact, they said special delivery and express mail service have already resumed, but other service isn't expected to get off the ground until tomorrow. Philip Holman, WCCO Television News, Minneapolis.
With traffic ground to a halt in the metropolitan area, there were lots of people with lots of free time on their hands today, and they enjoyed that, I'm sure.
While some stayed home, others got tough and just decided to head for work anyway. And then there were those who found even more interesting ways to take advantage of the blizzard. A story from Jim Newman.
It looked like a Sunday or an Ice Age scene from Twilight Zone. It was too forbidding for most workers to come to work. Banks and shops and such stayed dark. No vegetable beef stews simmered at Peter's Grill. The blanketed city streets became a recreational paradise. People like Zach and Teresa Feltnor skied the core area street grid like a country trail.
It's a little bit treacherous with the buses around that are running, but other than that, it's pretty safe, I guess, to be out on the streets.
Have you ever done anything like this before?
Not as crazy now.
Marathon joggers took to downtown streets. Lake paths were buried by the blizzard, but if there's a way, joggers jog.
We run about 2,600 miles a year. We're getting close to the end of the year, and it's a chance to get just a few more miles.
Lawyer Charlie Howard commuted cross-country to his downtown Minneapolis firm. Howard's 16-story law office was almost empty, as were plenty of other offices and buildings across the way. 20 of 22 folks failed to show today. Charlie's office was quiet, but for the classical station.
It was just very peaceful and quiet, and I had a chance to think and do things that operate really in a different way than had it been a normal work day.
Charlie's only regret, frozen yogurt shops were shut down. But he said it was nice to know he could get along, even when the city itself is slowed to a standstill. With photographer Dave Bowden, Jim Newman, WCCO Television News, downtown Minneapolis.
The Twin Cities, of course, were not alone in this wintry blast. Most of Rochester shut down today, as did many portions of southern Minnesota. The Mayo Clinic, however, was open. In Duluth, the airport is now open, but it was shut down for the better part of the day. About the only other things open in that area are the ski slopes. And all across southern Minnesota, highways remain closed most of the time. There have been 4 traffic deaths related to the blizzard, but tonight, highway traffic reportedly is picking up again. As for power outages across the state, 6,000 people had no electricity in southeastern Minnesota when freezing rain and ice pulled down power lines across a 4-county area. Crews from Wisconsin had to help restore service. And in Worthington, in southwestern Minnesota, about 1,000 homes had no power last night or this morning. The only major outage in the Twin Cities was at the airport, but the snow did wreck the roof on the Knox Lumber Company in Brooklyn Park. It brought down the dome at the Minneapolis Tennis Club. But the big dome, the one that deflated last winter, well, it's intact, but slightly dented. It wasn't so much the heavy snow that caused the problem, but a 200,000-pound set of lights and attachments hanging from the roof. The weight dents the roof, the snow melts, the water fills the dents in the roof. As more snow melts, the larger depressions, and so it went. It is expected to be repaired by tonight.